Mr. Khan has just told Kumar about investing in debt funds. They are now enjoying some noodles at Mr. Khan's favorite restaurant. Seema calls at that moment. "Hey darling," says Kumar, "don't worry. I have paid the bills and also chosen the debt funds to invest in." You said equity? Sorry, no, I was listening. Wait, let me explain. Okay, no, I promise I will invest in an equity funds by this weekend. Yes, I know how to choose the funds, Kumar stammers. He puts the phone down and sheepishly turns to Mr. Khan. "Don't worry, Kumar. I love these noodles so much, I'm happy to tell you all about equity funds over the meal." Thank you, says Kumar. "I promise to buy you the best dessert in town after this." "That offer sounds great to me," says Mr. Khan. He then explains, when you are choosing an equity fund, there are several factors to consider. The first is consistency. Say you are trying to nominate the best batsman. The first thing you would want to do is check if he is consistent, which means you check his scores in every tournament for the last several years, not just the broad average. Similarly, you first look at the rolling returns for the fund for the last 7 to 10 years. Rolling returns are the annualized returns of the scheme taken for a specified period, rolling returns period, on every day, week or month, and taken till the last day of the duration. It measures returns on mutual funds at different points of time. This eliminates bias of returns from any particular point. It proves the fund is a batsman that does well against Australia as well as England. Kumar nods. Absolutely. A good batsman must do that. Mr. Khan continues, you need to compare this against the average of other great batsmen who are a benchmark to truly know if his batting figures are good. One needs to compare the rolling returns of the fund with benchmark rolling returns for the same period. For example, large cap fund will be benchmarked with large cap index, Nifty 50 index TRI. Ideally, invest in the fund which has beaten benchmark returns for the period you are assessing. Consistency is one thing, but when I choose a batsman, I also think of stability and dependability, says Kumar. Mr. Khan smiles and says, "Good point. This is precisely the reason we also look at the standard deviation of the fund, which determines how risky the scheme is or how volatile the portfolio is. Assume a scheme ABC has a standard deviation of 8% and an average return of 12% per annum. Then this means the scheme will deviate by 8% from its expected average return and may give returns between 4 and 20%. Higher the standard deviation, higher the fluctuation in returns. It is like a batsman who may suddenly go out for a string of single-digit scores or goes on to slam a 200. For me, dependability is what makes match winners, Kumar says with great passion. Mr. Khan nods. That's the reason why we also have other risk ratios to study before choosing a fund. They are alpha, beta, and Sharpe ratio. Alpha tells us about the fund manager's performance against a benchmark index. Alpha is depicted as an integer. When the alpha ratio is higher than 1.0, it means the fund has outperformed its benchmark index. Think of it like the ratio that compares performance of batsman and coach against other great players. After all, the coach has a huge bearing on the player's performance. Whereas, beta is the measure of how volatile a fund is when compared to the index or stock market. Higher volatility means higher risks along with higher returns. Beta shows how stable the fund was when markets were volatile. It is like an indication of how the batsman performed on green pitches or under overcast conditions compared to others on the same pitch. Kumar says, right, so we know how the fund performs compared to other funds in a volatile market. Exactly, Kumar. Mr. Khan smiles and continues. The next ratio you need to analyze is the Sharpe ratio, which measures the risk-adjusted return of the portfolio. The ratio is used to gauge the performance of an investment by adjusting for its risk. Sharpe ratio formula equals average fund return minus risk-free rate divided by standard deviation of fund returns. The Sharpe ratio can also help explain whether the portfolio's excess returns are due to smart investment decisions or a result of too much risk. Although one portfolio or fund can enjoy higher returns than its peers, it is only a good investment if those high returns do not come from an excess of additional risk. The greater a portfolio's Sharpe ratio, the better its risk-adjusted performance. Think of it like a ratio that enables you to compare a batsman who has been scoring well, but where a large bulk of his runs come because he takes huge risks, with a batsman who scores lesser but does so with more control and less risk. Kumar furiously takes notes and nods. Another measure of risk-adjusted return is the information ratio. The information ratio is defined as the average excess return of the fund with respect to the benchmark for a given period, divided by the standard deviation of the excess return. The ratio provides investors with insight about the ability of the fund manager to sustain the generation of excess returns over time. It describes the ability of the coach to get his batsmen to perform beyond what other benchmark batsmen are able to perform, set against their volatility. Got it. Can you give me a simple recap, please? Requests Kumar. Sure, says Mr. Khan. Choose the subcategory within equity based on your risk-taking ability. Mid and small cap funds tend to be higher risk as compared to index funds, but may give higher returns. Always compare the fund versus the benchmark and category average. Check the expense ratio of the fund versus other funds. One needs to check for the consistency of risk-adjusted returns and ratios, especially information ratio, over long periods, 7 to 10 years, in order to assess a fund to buy. Will you remember all of this? Asks Mr. Khan. Certainly, says Kumar. I also remember that you are about to eat the greatest dessert of your life. Both of them laugh heartily.